Hey there everybody, I am going to give you a quick tutorial on Desmos today. I mentioned Desmos at the basically the first day of class, and so what I want to do is give you kind of a little introduction to that because maybe you've looked at it, maybe not, but I want to show you some of the things it can do and why I think it's better than any graphing calculator that you might buy. So we're going to be doing some stuff with graphing anyway, and I might even have you do some projects with Desmos, and so you might as well know how to use it. So the first thing is when you go to the website here, so www.desmos.com, you'll come to this home page. I would say explore around here too. They've got some interesting tutorials themselves, some games even, some different things you can do with graphing that I think would be beneficial. You can kind of check that out, but they got some really great stuff. But anyway, I'll show you some of the basic things you can do, and then you can be free to explore to your heart's content. Alright, so we're just going to click the Start Graphing, and what's going to come up is the graphing window here. And so we've got our coordinate plane. What I like about this is it's really easy to adjust. You just click and drag to change things. You can zoom in and out using your mouse pad, two-touch scrolling, or whatever you have. So it's nice and easy to adjust. The other nice thing I like about Desmos is that you can create a free account. If you're using this for homework or doing some of the exploration of graphs that we'll be using this for, if you create an elaborate graph or something, you don't always have to start from scratch. You can just save your graph and come back to it. So that's something to look at. Alright, so let's just take a look here. So the left here in this box over here, we're going to do all of our typing as far as the stuff we're going to enter in. You can see that there's some symbols down here which you might need on some occasions, but mostly we're just going to type it right in. So what is a graph? Right, so you do graphing a lot. You have learned that in probably middle school, through high school, do it again in college. Graphs are used a lot in the sciences to show the relationships between variables and things, so they're very useful. But what is a graph, right? So we got these two number lines here, right? And we call one of them the x-axis. That's usually the horizontal one. We got one of them as the y-axis. That's the vertical one. And we can think of this whole coordinate plane as the set of all possible ordered pairs that you could form, right? And it gives us a visual of the relationship between two variables that a function describes. So one kind of function that everybody was familiar with from day one, it seemed, was your linear function, which y equals mx plus b. So let's do one of those. So if I come over here, I'm going to use function notation, and this is a nice thing that you can just type this right into Desmos. You come up with whatever you want, so maybe like 3x plus 2. And it just graphs it immediately for you. And you can adjust it, zoom in or out, or whatever you want to do. But there you go. So all the points on this line, right, are the ordered pairs that satisfy the equation relationship that you've typed in over here. And if you like, you can throw in as many of these as you want. We could even do maybe a quadratic. You want to name it something else though, so this time maybe g of x. We could even throw in an x squared. Right? Get a parabola. You can see they cross at certain points. Right? Do things like that. We can even click on the graphs and see, follow the ordered pair there. Right, so as we move the point along this graph, you can see all the different ordered pairs that make it up, right? And even see where they cross right there. So that's kind of nice. I think that's easier than using the trace on a graphing calculator, any of those things, so that's really handy. Okay, great. So you can put as many of these functions in here as you like. You just got to name them all different things, and there you go. The other nice thing that you can do with Desmos is you can be pretty general with it. So let's get rid of these. And everybody remembers that y equals mx plus b is just the general form of a linear function. So let's type that in. Again, I'll use f of x equals, and we can just type mx plus b. And you notice it'll give you, asks you if you want sliders. So I'm just going to click all, and you get these sliders for m and b, and you notice it starts them out at 1. All right, so the graph corresponding this is where m is 1 and b is 1. And then you can adjust that and see what happens in real time. And since we're going to be talking about transformations at some point in the quarter, this will be a very handy thing to be able to explore what adjusting different parameters of the function does. Right? So you can kind of see how this one raises it up and down, and changing m, right, as the slope affects how steep the line is, things like that. Okay, so a couple of things to notice here is you've got these bounds, right, from -10 to 10. That gives you kind of the range in which you can adjust between. And you can change that if you like. So if you want to go farther, you can change the bounds to, maybe you want a bit of a bigger range here. So we could do maybe -20 to 20, or 15 even if you want. It doesn't have to be the same number. Like that. And then that'll change how far you can take it. The other thing you might have noticed there is its step. What that controls is how sensitive the slider is. So if you want to do very minute or very tiny adjustments, you want that number to be pretty darn small. So, if you made it something like 0.1, then everything is going to adjust in tenths. And it's pretty smooth. You can do pretty small adjustments and things like that. If you want more, so if you make it bigger, like 5, all of your changes are going to come in increments of 5, right? So it jumps by 5s. And I don't know, maybe that's useful, maybe not. But you can specify that if you like. Maybe even smaller, 100. And now you've got very fine adjusting control here. Okay, so that's something that's very interesting and handy that you can do. And you can do that for all of your sliders and play around with that. Okay, since we're going to be talking first about rational functions, let's get rid of this here. Let's just do an example of one of those. So we'll be defining rational functions more specifically in class, but here's an example of one. It's going to be a ratio, so we'll have some kind of a expression, polynomial expression up in the numerator, so maybe something like 3x. And in the denominator, we'll do something like, I don't know, 3x plus 5, maybe. Okay, and you can see you've got the graph. You can kind of explore it. Okay, you can see different features about it. It's kind of got this interesting split-up shape here, like 2 pieces to this. And we'll be able to explore a little bit more, why does it create this shape? But there you go. You can, again, zoom in or out, get a better picture of what it looks like. But there you go. Okay, so again, add as many of those in as you like. Kind of see how they, since we'll be doing equations involving rational functions, so rational equations, you might put in, say, another one and look at where they intersect. So maybe it's x plus 1 over x squared. There you go. All right, so then that's a point where they intersect, right? So we can look for solutions to equations this way as well. So that's handy. Okay, last thing I want to show you then is, again, we can make this pretty general. So if we wanted to look at rational functions of a particular kind, let me just see. Maybe we want to explore all rational functions where the numerator is a linear expression, right? So maybe we do, let's write it as ax plus b, right? Kind of like mx plus b, but we'll use a and b there. And down here, maybe we put a quadratic, and we could say maybe cx squared plus dx plus actually, you notice so you notice one thing here. It's not asking you if you want to create a slider for e, and that's because e is actually reserved as a number. E is a number. It's an irrational number, just like pi is an irrational number. So that's one we're going to actually have to avoid. So maybe let's do, we don't want to pick f because we already used that as the name of the function. I don't know, so maybe n. Okay? Doesn't matter what you pick. But as long as they're not already defined for something else, you can create that. Now it asks you if you want sliders for all of these. Let's just go ahead and do that. Again, it starts you off at 1 for all of them. and it shows you what the graph would look like for those settings. And then again, you can just adjust them and see what each of these parts does to the graph. Okay? And you can see that you get some interesting changes depending on the values you choose. Okay. All right, so you can always do this where you can create these general sort of equations, or functions, and create sliders for these things and adjust them and see what they do. And occasionally we might be interested in trying to make it look a certain way. So if you notice, this graph went from, so if I readjust this back to, so now here we have one solid continuous curve, you see. Whereas if I adjust some of these parts, they become multiple pieces. Oops. If I can get it. There they go. There we go. Right, so now we've got 3 pieces to the graph. So those are things we will explore. You know, why does that happen? But at least you can get a visual of it. All right, so this would be something, maybe you set all this up and you don't want to redo it all. So this would be where you would have your account, and you could actually save this graph and come back and tweak it later. All right, so there you go. That's, you know, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but gives you some nice visual of what you're trying to work with. Again, it gives you some features that I think are a lot better than what you'd have on just a little graphing calculator, and they're much easier to use. And like I said, we'll probably use this for some of our homework assignments, where we'll create graphs. You can print them out and then turn them in or do whatever we want to do with them. So there you go. I hope that was helpful, and now I encourage you to explore, create some graphs, do some sliders, change some different things, and we'll see if we can do some more tutorials in the near future.